Am I the AE for not acknowledging my father after he ruined his relationship with my siblings and me? I would like to caution you that I am using text-to-speech software to compose this. Any grammatical or spelling mistakes are a result of that. I am currently experiencing a severe arthritis flare-up, making it easier for me to convey my thoughts in this manner. I am 25 years old, and for the majority of my life, I was a daddy's girl. You see, my grandmother and my mother held demanding jobs that usually occupied them from 5 in the morning until nearly 8 at night. Sometimes, they endured long hours to make ends meet or to pursue a bit of education in hopes of securing a promotion. On other occasions, if they managed to work a typical shift that ended by 5, they would be so exhausted that I rarely had the opportunity to see them for more than 2 or 3 hours a day. Throughout the years, my mother made efforts to adjust her shifts so that she could attend our football games, cheerleading events, violin recitals, or any other innocent activities we participated in. Along the way, my grandmother suffered a work-related injury that allowed her to retire early with a decent pension, which helped sustain us over the years. This often meant that one of the few people supervising us at home was indeed my father, at least until my grandmother was injured. He had a habit of coming into our rooms early in the morning with his little rooster call. He ensured we were properly dressed, made sure we were in the car on time, and always drove us to school. He consistently reinforced the importance of family, emphasizing that we needed to support one another no matter the circumstances. However, my father was also a rather hypocritical man. He had grown up in an unstable environment with an extremely abusive stepfather and a mother who was perpetually busy. Consequently, our little quirks as kids often overwhelmed him or were perceived as disrespectful or annoying. An undiagnosed man with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder who was constantly self-medicating also struggled to remember dates and often had difficulty recalling small facts that he deemed insignificant. This made our interactions occasionally tumultuous, but he always managed to mend things by reminding us of his love for us, offering hugs, or engaging us in fun activities like watching movies. I spent considerable time with him and became so accustomed to our dynamics that for a significant period of my life, I viewed my mother as the negligent parent for not being present. However, my mother eventually became my closest friend as I entered puberty and approached high school. She was able to relate to my body image concerns, my stress regarding my hair, my weight struggles, and other daily challenges women encounter in society. I became increasingly grateful for a mother who was so candid and always willing to listen. This openness boosted my confidence to reach out to her and learn about her own life experiences. By the time I entered high school and began contributing to our household bills, I no longer had a preferred parent. I was simply grateful that I had 2 parents who cared about me. But then one day, I realized my father had not been home for nearly 3 weeks. For context, there were instances when he would be absent for a few days, which my mother would sometimes attribute to him visiting one of his cousins or spending time at a friend's house, typically after a night of drinking or playing poker. It took me a couple of years to comprehend that my father had developed a gambling addiction along with several other minor addictions. I don't hold any resentment toward him for having vices. As I mentioned, he led a difficult life and never underwent therapy. When I realized he had been absent for much longer than usual, I tried to think of a way to ask my mother about it. It took me about a day to muster the courage, but it became unnecessary when she called us into my younger brother's room. I am the oldest of 4 siblings, with my youngest sister being 8 years younger than I am. The most significant aspect I recall from our conversation was the fact that none of my siblings or I were surprised by what it was about. My mother had finally decided to kick my father out of the house after years of constant arguments. Most of his belongings were either taken with him or hastily packed into bags for him to collect later. He would be relocating to my grandmother's apartment, which he was partially covering the expenses for. She seldom stayed there, as she needed to travel back home to Puerto Rico for various surgeries and treatments since American health insurance was prohibitively expensive. I also remember being the most upset among my siblings regarding this change. For a brief period, my father made an effort to visit us occasionally and take us out. It was not always consistent, but at least it occurred once a month. These outings typically involved bowling or dining out, and they only lasted a few hours. I don't believe he understood the permanence of our situation for approximately the first 3 months. He still felt comfortable within the house and often wandered into their old bedroom, touching or moving things around. My mother repeatedly asked him to refrain from doing that, yet he continued to do so on multiple occasions. During our conversations, he would casually make hurtful comments about her. He would try to manipulate us into asking for more time with him as a means of gaining re-entry into the house, speaking about all the wonderful experiences we could have if we accompanied him to Puerto Rico. The concept terrified me. For additional context, my father had never held a stable job, had a problematic criminal history, and sustained an injury when I was young, which left him with chronic knee issues. My mother and grandmother were the primary financial providers in our household. I recall days when my father lounged around, playing video games and smoking, while my mother returned home, fatigued only to scold him for the lingering smell of smoke. Over the years, there were countless instances when he exhibited ungrateful or slightly cruel behavior. At that time, I hadn't really contemplated it because that was just his nature. Before I turned 20, my mother firmly declared that he was no longer allowed in the house after realizing some of her belongings were missing. Consequently, it became increasingly challenging to see him. The man infrequently answered his phone unless he chose to call us. He would only visit if it meant he had money to spend on us, despite the reality that we simply wanted to see him without any outings planned. His frustration over my mother not taking him back and her complete decision to evict him led to all our conversations revolving around her. My siblings gradually distanced themselves from him, choosing to cut ties as they recognized he was not the kind of person they wished to engage with. I couldn't fault them for this, as I genuinely felt the same. However, as a daddy's girl, the prospect of abandoning him was incredibly painful. Thus, I lingered. But I was also attending college, which required me to put in many additional hours for my degree, a field he had once taken considerable pride in. Yet, it appeared to hold no significance to him when it interfered with his need to complain to me. The stress of it all and his negativity initially led me to stop responding to him for a while. I would attempt to reach out on holidays or birthdays, offer my apologies, and act as if nothing had happened, hoping that each time I returned, he would finally have learned from his past mistakes. Yet, the situation never altered. I would find myself experiencing false hope before he resorted back to his cruel remarks, albeit with a new twist. Suddenly, I became his spokesperson, constantly being assigned the task of persuading my siblings to return to his side. After all, as the eldest, he believed they should listen to me, as if my siblings were not their own individuals but rather extensions of me. It felt as if we were mere pets needing to be guided. This dynamic led to numerous arguments between my siblings and me. For a while, I believed him and felt it was my responsibility. But then, after a thoughtful sit-down with my sister, we had an extensive conversation that resulted in many tears. Despite the age gap, I overlooked that she could also perceive what I was observing. We came to a consensus that I needed to establish boundaries if I intended to keep him in my life. Therefore, during our next conversation, I informed my father that I would no longer act as his messenger. He was displeased and we quarreled, leading to a period of silence between us that lasted several weeks. When my father eventually reached out to me again, he came with apologies. He insisted that he understood and that there was no reason for me to worry about it again. Instead, he inquired about my day, checked on how I was feeling, and sought updates on my siblings. There would be no pleas for intervention, but he would express sentiments like wishing he could have been present or wishing he could have witnessed certain events. On Instagram, he sent me videos emphasizing the importance of having a father in the family and how crucial a father is to children. He liked any posts involving my siblings or me and constantly monitored my stories for updates. I genuinely believed things were improving. However, now that I am 25, my father was injured several months ago and required surgery. It felt as though a switch had flipped, sending him into a downward spiral. I empathized with his pain and wanted to assist, but each interaction subsequently devolved into arguments and demands. The sustained guilt tripping over the years has worn me down to the point where I no longer engage with him. I refrain from viewing his stories, checking his page, or reading any messages he sends me across any social media platform. Each notification is merely another video or series of messages, all conveying variations of statements like, "I can't believe you would treat me like this," or, "Was I not a good father? I never laid a hand on any of you. If I could forgive my stepfather, why can't you forgive me?" Each time, it brings me to tears. Thus, I have decided to post this. Am I the wrong one for choosing not to acknowledge my father after he destroyed his relationship with my siblings and me? Story 2. Aita for wanting to break up with my 24M girlfriend 24F because of my brother's 26M girlfriend 27F. I am using a throwaway account because some individuals involved in this situation use Reddit, and I believe the title sounds worse than it is, so I ask for your consideration. I wanted to post this in the relationship advice section, but it was deemed too similar to "Am I the asshole?" or Aita. I initially did not intend to determine whether I was the antagonist, but perhaps I should. My brother Logan, 26 years old, is the most significant person in my life. I realize that may seem cliché or obvious since he is my brother, but we grew up in a very difficult household, relying solely on each other during our childhood. He is essentially the only family member I still communicate with. We also have an excellent rapport. Many people remark on how similar we are. Recently, last November, he and his girlfriend, let's call her Kat, 27 years old, moved in with my girlfriend, let's call her Maeve, 24 years old, and me. Initially, I believed everything was going smoothly. Maeve and Kat got along well, and I liked Kat significantly more than my brother's previous long-term girlfriend. This is not because I have any romantic interest in Kat. I want to be clear about that. However, the issues that led me to write this post arose in early January. Both Maeve and Kat experienced something traumatic within a few weeks of each other. Maeve's experience was objectively more severe, but throughout her ordeal, Kat reached out, trying to support her, and even asking my brother to help with small tasks that he and I hadn't considered while she was at work, so Maeve would not be alone. Yet, when Kat faced her issues, Maeve confronted Logan, insulting Kat and her family and implying they made poor choices. I was not present to witness the confrontation, nor was Kat, but my brother was understandably upset. For a week following that incident, Maeve ranted to me about Kat's family, whom she has never met, and expressed her anger towards Logan for not apologizing for, raising his voice at her, while she refused to apologize for her part. It escalated to the point where Kat approached me, urging me to discuss with Maeve the possibility of them mutually apologizing, as Logan was on the verge of moving out only a month and a half after moving in. That event has lingered in my mind, and I have started noticing several small issues that trouble me. Kat is quite successful, which does not concern me as I'm glad my brother has someone who has supported him through a challenging year. He was laid off a few months ago and is struggling to find new employment. Maeve and I work at the same place, a local mall within walking distance. I am a full-time employee working towards an assistant manager position, and I recently assisted her in securing a part-time job at a store adjacent to mine. I take pride in my job and feel no threat from others, and Maeve has always felt similarly. Recently, however, she has made some unpleasant remarks that make me feel that may be changing. She has suggested that Kat probably landed her job, insinuating that she secured it through dubious means, and believes Kat does not deserve it. Kat has never boasted about her job, she merely talks about it, but Maeve claims that's pretentious and that Kat is self-centered because she articulates it in ways that Maeve feels deliberately make her seem less intelligent. I have also tried to get to know Kat better since she is the newest member of our group, and I feel she might be somewhat isolated in the house outside of her relationship with Logan. Whenever I attempt to include Kat in group activities, I never intend to do anything alone with her, as that feels inappropriate. Maeve usually responds with a sarcastic comment, such as, "Oh, naturally we cannot proceed until Kat arrives," or "Right, we have to ensure Kat gets a voice too." It appears harmless when written down, but it feels disparaging in the moment. I could likely overlook that behavior given the history Maeve and I share, but it's not just that Maeve is stirring up conflicts and being dismissive towards others. I also witness the relationship Kat has with my brother daily, and it gives me an unsettling feeling in my stomach when I observe them. Before Kat, Logan was in a relationship with someone neither Maeve nor I liked, as she did not treat him respectfully and struggled to converse about anything outside her focus. However, Kat is entirely different. She treats my brother well, checks in to ensure he has lunch, and tries to prepare quick meals for both of them when she cooks. I understand that may not seem significant when stated like this, but both Maeve and I have a complex relationship with food due to our upbringing in poverty, which limited our access to it. They share many laughs together, and she never raises her voice, throws things, or creates unnecessary drama. It has reached a point where observing their relationship has caused me to question certain aspects of my relationship with Maeve, wondering if they are typical or seemed acceptable only when compared to poor role models. Kat shows genuine interest in Logan's hobbies and asks questions that Maeve never asks me. She appears intelligent and has a good sense of humor. Kat and Logan share interests that Maeve and I do not, and she engages with the things that matter to him in a manner that is more than merely temporary or half-hearted, which I strive to do for Maeve, yet she frequently dismisses my interests as childish or outright refuses to engage with them. When Maeve does participate in my interests, she seems competitive and aims to outdo me. I am not trying to be harsh with Maeve, either. We have known one another our entire lives, and she is the only girl I have ever been with. I love her, and I have always believed that we would eventually marry once we were both ready. I understand that much of this may stem from the fact that Maeve and I have been together for 7 years, while Kat and my brother have only been together for 1 year. I'm not trying to fall into the grass is greener mindset. Maeve is humorous, creative, beautiful, interesting, and very sociable. I cherish all these aspects of her and more. However, I am beginning to worry that she is also somewhat unkind. What stands out most to me about Kat is her kindness. She listens to my brother, and they engage in conversations that I feel Maeve and I lack. I often feel at fault when Maeve and I argue, and I am so afraid of losing her that I frequently acquiesce to whatever she wants because I worry she will leave me if I do not. Maeve can be jealous and tends to crave a lot of attention. She has instigated several conflicts between me and Logan, threatening to sever all ties with him and persuading me to do the same until he does something she desires, all while managing to convince me that it was Logan's fault, or my friend's or someone else's, depending on who she wishes to distance herself from. I have always accepted her reasoning because it seemed logical, but recently I have started to question it. Maeve often makes dismissive comments, as I previously mentioned, about the individuals who are significant to me. She insists I tell her how much more attractive she is than other women, and then demands I elaborate on why I find the other women less appealing and less desirable, which is extremely uncomfortable for me. Not long ago, during intimacy, she even asked me if I thought she was better than Kat, which immediately created concern for me because I have never expressed any interest in Kat aside from my own feelings of jealousy regarding her relationship with my brother. I see no reason for Maeve to feel threatened by Kat. She is attractive and a good person, but she is objectively not even close to my type, which those who know me would recognize, especially Maeve. Understandably, all of this is beginning to significantly impact my relationship with Maeve. I also feel it is hurting my relationship with Logan. He appears to sense that Maeve is competing with Kat and has reduced his communication with Maeve in response. They remain cordial, but Maeve has always taken pride in their close friendship. And ever since the altercation about Kat's family, I doubt my brother views her in that same light. Kat seems to be handling the situation well, but I imagine she must be aware of the underlying tension as well, although she may choose to remain neutral to avoid further complications. I'm unsure if that's the case, or if perhaps Logan has not divulged the details of Maeve's comments about her family to Kat. Having overheard it from Maeve, if I were Kat, I would be upset. What frightens me is that I sense I am beginning to lose respect for Maeve. I am starting to perceive her as somewhat immature, which may not be a fair comparison given that Kat and Logan are a few years older than us. I have attempted to address with Maeve the importance of speaking more kindly about Kat and my brother, but she consistently maintains that it is my responsibility as her boyfriend to listen to her grievances, asserting that everyone complains about their roommates, and that Kat and Logan likely have their own dislikes about us too. I agree with this, but I cannot seem to stop viewing Maeve as a mean girl. Now, how can I address this? I am sincerely seeking advice. Maeve and I have been in a relationship since we were 16 or 17, and we have known one another since we were 8. I believe she is a good person at heart, but I detest the way she treats Kat and Logan. Observing their mutual respect provides me discomfort regarding how she treats me as well. This has fostered resentment in me regarding why she appears not to value me or my opinion in the same manner that Kat values Logan's. So, am I in the wrong for contemplating a breakup with Maeve over these issues? Am I overreacting? These instances feel minor in the moment, but they are beginning to accumulate. In summary, my brother Logan, 26 years old, and his girlfriend Kat, 27 years old, recently moved in with my girlfriend of 7 years, Maeve, 24 years old, and me, 24 years old. And Maeve's negative behavior toward Kat and my brother is jeopardizing my relationship with her. Story 3. Do I, a 29-year-old female, forgive my ex-friend, also 29, or risk losing my friends of the past 20 years? I altered a few names and modified the timeline slightly, so if I am extremely unfortunate and any of them come across this, perhaps it won't be glaringly obvious it's me. I likely have not executed this very well, to be honest. I first encountered Kay at the beginning of high school, and shortly after, I became friends with L and M. The four of us have remained close friends ever since. Our group has had a peculiar dynamic because, for many years, we were not inclined to engage in conflict or discuss negative aspects about one another. Later, we all discovered that we are diagnosed with autism, which explains a lot. We enjoyed each other's company, discussing books, sharing stories, and drawing, among other activities. To summarize, Kay and I ended up dating for approximately 6 years, give or take. We were teenagers, so it was casual yet intense. Admittedly, our most significant display of affection was a quick peck on the cheek. Our relationship was kept secret because, at that time, being gay was less accepted than it is now. Her parents were extremely homophobic, and we generally wanted to avoid making L and M uncomfortable or awkward. Eventually, one of us made an error. A rumor spread throughout the school, and her parents discovered the truth, thanks to her aunt working at the institution. Kay was given the ultimatum to either be kicked out of her home and become homeless or not. By this point, she was 18. So overnight, all contact between us was terminated, and her aunt kept tabs on her at school to ensure we weren't communicating, which we weren't. However, we continued to be the best of friends with L and M, who were unaware of the situation between Kay and me. While they sensed something was amiss, they typically acted as if nothing had happened to avoid stress or conflict. Yes, it was as uncomfortable as it sounds. This situation persisted for about 6 years. We saw each other less frequently, but we still met occasionally. The first year was tough, but over time it became our new normal. We remained polite around L and M, engaging in small talk, and both found ourselves in long-term relationships as life continued. Last year, L purchased a card game that was designed to help people get to know one another better. I cannot recall the exact question, but it led Kay to inquire whether I regretted what had transpired between us as teenagers. We both decided to write letters and agreed to send them to each other. To my surprise, we both reported that we did not regret what had happened. We only felt sorry that the other had experienced so much pain. For years, we both believed the other harbored resentment, but that wasn't the reality at all. So we began to reconnect over the next year until we returned to being best friends, once again chatting daily, sharing memes, and meeting up for dinners. This was everything I had ever wished for because I had missed them dearly. I always considered them a soulmate in either a platonic or romantic sense and felt that they belonged in my life forever. Being apart created a massive void in my existence. I must admit, however, that I always held feelings for Kay. I never really moved on. Nevertheless, it mattered more to me to have her in my life than anything else. As an asexual person, I perceived having her as a best friend or a partner as practically the same experience. Then things became complicated. Kay began calling me endearing names, which was fine and sweet. I reciprocated. Soon after, she started cuddling with me on the sofa, a behavior she had never exhibited before, as she had always been quite reserved. This was a new but welcome development. Subsequently, during our meetups, she started referring to our time together as dates. Throughout this period, I checked in regularly, asking if she was comfortable with the direction things were heading and providing ample opportunity for her to clarify whether this was strictly platonic. However, it became increasingly apparent that this was more than mere friendship. But I was okay with this. It exceeded anything I could have ever imagined. I asked her to be my Valentine, and she enthusiastically replied with a sweet, excited voice note saying yes. But I am posting in this community, so naturally, this isn't where the story ends. She requested some space, as her cat had recently passed away, and she was staying at her parents' house. She remains in contact with them despite everything, no judgment, just stating a fact. Well, 5 days passed, and I had yet to hear back from her. Considering we had been communicating daily for the preceding months, I reached out to check in. I knew she sometimes needed time alone, so I was understandably a bit concerned, but I thought it was reasonable. She informed me that she wanted to revert to being just friends, perhaps communicating only occasionally, sending a meme here and there, but that she no longer felt comfortable with the cuddling and such. To be candid, I was completely blindsided by this revelation. However, over the weeks and months, my feelings for her resurfaced in full force, and I came to the realization that I could not accept this new arrangement. I had lost her once, and those years of awkward interactions with L and M, punctuated by small talk, had been unbearable. I was determined not to endure that again. Therefore, I told her no. I expressed my disappointment that I had checked in with her multiple times regarding her feelings, and that every action had been initiated by her. I had refrained from taking the initiative because I wanted her to feel comfortable, knowing I had feelings for her. After acknowledging that it was okay for me to feel the way I did, she changed her mind. She had previously seemed okay with everything but suddenly realized she wasn't. People are, of course, entitled to change their minds. However, she never provided me with a reason for stepping back. When I asserted that I required space, and that I could not merely be friends since I would always have stronger feelings for her, she acknowledged my stance and mentioned that the door would remain open should I wish to reach out. Just like before, L and M remain oblivious to anything that transpired between K and me, and I am unsure what to do next. I understand it was not intentional, but I am feeling immensely hurt, misled, and betrayed by K. Even a month later, the mere thought of seeing her name in our group chats is unbearable. I have deceived L and M, telling them I am undertaking a social media detox and claiming my Facebook isn't functioning, among other lies. Thus far, I have managed to pull it off. I currently reside near L and M but plan to move to Katakes City later this year for work. I have informed L and M that I want to spend more time with them before relocating because I'll be seeing K frequently once I move. However, I cannot evade this situation indefinitely. I cannot simply skip L and Mtkes birthdays or social gatherings just because I anticipate seeing K. It hurts tremendously, and I am truly angry that she put me in this position, as she was unsure of her feelings when I had given her numerous chances to back away before I became too invested. With L and M both on the autism spectrum, Mtkes' condition is more severe, and she cannot cope with conflict without significant distress, so I cannot tell him what is going on. L would likely manage the situation well, but they have always been closer to K, and part of me wants to gradually fade away from the group to avoid any further interactions with K. At the same time, I am acutely aware that this is a drastic escalation, highly dramatic, and unfair to L and M, who have been supportive friends to me all these years. Yet, time continues to pass, and I remain at a loss as to what to do. I had inadvertently shared my Uber location with Kay last week, which I forgot I had done, and she submitted a request to Uber to have it removed, of which I received a notification. That stung. Additionally, I noticed I have been removed from all our shared Spotify playlists. These small, albeit somewhat petty actions, make me question whether, if I were to message Kay to accept her offer of being casual friends to relieve some tension, which I am uncertain if I even desire, she would still be interested in that arrangement. I am fortunate to have a wonderful online community and several local friends to visit. Therefore, if I were to lose L and M, it would cause me significant pain, but I would still have people in my life, and it would hurt much less than reliving the previous experience I had with K. I see myself with a few choices. Option 1. Message Kay and take her up on her offer to be casual friends, understanding that this would mean having to see and interact with her, which would be painful. But it would spare L&M from awkwardness even if she says no and makes things even worse. Option 2. Gradually distance myself from L&M to avoid any interaction with Kay, allowing me the opportunity to eventually overcome my feelings for her and move forward in my life. Option 3. Confide in L about what has transpired, keeping him in the dark or sharing as little as possible, and see how things unfold from there. I am less inclined towards option 3 because it would mean airing our private matters, risking L discussing it with K, and potentially damaging my already fragile connection with K due to violating her privacy and creating discomfort within our group. Although L and M may sense that something is amiss, given past events, they are far happier pretending that nothing is wrong if it means we can all remain together. Story 4. The responsibility of being a white guy crushes me. Fair warning in advance, I am going to express a lot of frustration about how challenging it is to be a white male in an industrialized Western nation. What I mean by that is the burden of responsibility it entails. Naturally, my life is nowhere close to the difficulties faced by individuals in developing nations, people of color, those perceived as female, individuals with significant disabilities, and those living in poverty, among others. At least, my experiences are not being made as complicated from an external perspective. The only privileges I seem to lack are being cisgender, heterosexual, in perfect health and wealthy. Nevertheless, I want to emphasize, I see your struggle. I am striving to fully understand its breadth, and it feels as though I am coming apart at the seams. For context, I view myself as significantly left-leaning on the political spectrum. I identify as transmasculine, meaning I was assigned female at birth. While I would not necessarily label myself as a man, the term guy resonates with me, and I consistently present as male, having legally transitioned. I was born and raised in Germany in a family that provided me with a good education. If it weren't for my appearance, I would not have to worry about experiencing discrimination in everyday life. While growing up, I learned about good virtues, but as is often the case, it was done without deeper understanding. I was instructed that skin color is irrelevant, that girls possess equal capabilities as boys, that one should not treat others poorly because of their bodies, to be kind to animals, to maintain a clean environment, and, naturally, to be compassionate and share. However, I later realized that this seemingly only applies to those I cannot ignore. For me, it began with environmental awareness, turning off lights, minimizing unnecessary car travel, reminding my grandmother to close the fridge. It became serious during my teenage years when I discovered my transgender identity and learned about queer feminism. I became aware of the struggles faced by anyone who is not cisgender, not heterosexual, and to a marginally lesser extent, anyone who is not perceived as male. Around the same time, Brexit occurred, prompting me to contemplate the implications of international cooperation or the absence thereof. Additionally, it was the period when Fridays for Future gained widespread recognition. These three factors ignited my interest in politics. Since then, a significant amount has transpired. I have come to understand how fortunate I am. My peers assert that ethnicity is not an achievement, and thus not something to take pride in. This should not be confused with appreciating the beauty of the culture one was raised in or celebrating accomplishments against oppression. By the same reasoning, I shouldn't feel ashamed of my heritage, yet I cannot shake the dreadful awareness that my ancestors and their contemporaries inflicted immense suffering, and my peers and I continue to do so. It is our duty to rectify past wrongs, and although I strive to do my part, it seems that every day I discover new ways in which my actions cause harm to the planet and its inhabitants. Just as I begin to grasp another, privilege, as merely another form of exploitation of other humans, species, or the environment, it feels as though more of what I know and find comforting collapses around me. I am not one to insist that consuming animal products is inherently unethical. Animals consume one another as well. Perhaps this is the influence of my depression speaking, but if someone were to approach me and whether to consume me, or for any reason terminate my life without inflicting additional suffering, I would not object, at least not afterwards. I would be dead and incapable of having any objections. However, I firmly believe that animal cruelty must be eradicated. Animals deserve space to roam and mental stimulation. Cows should not be forcibly impregnated. Birds are not designed to lay large eggs daily. Moreover, even if one is indifferent to the welfare of non-human beings, it is undeniable that a predominantly, if not entirely plant-based diet can nourish more individuals per resources utilized and has a lesser environmental impact. I enjoy the taste of meat and struggle to find satisfactory alternatives for cheese and cream, but I am making an effort. The notion that individual changes in consumption habits will not significantly impact our situation if we allow corporations to wreak havoc and manipulate us into believing that a single-use cup is what contaminates the ocean is particularly disheartening. Please still avoid them, as every small effort counts. Also, consider trying alternatives. You don't have to completely eliminate meat or cheese to appreciate a good substitute from time to time. Then there are the struggles associated with queer feminism. While I am grateful to have escaped, most of them due to passing as male, that does not imply indifference on my part. In fact, I often feel worse about it because now I carry the weight of guilt. Guilt that I might make individuals identifying as women, lesbians, intersex, non-binary, trans, and agender feel unsafe or threatened by my presence. I once allowed a queer activist to use my shower and offered them a meal and a place to stay for the night, with no ill intentions, only to be taken aback by their evident fear. I found myself torn between revealing my transgender identity to perhaps reassure them and withholding that information to protect my own privacy, as they already might know troubling details about my life, should any fascists come after me. Additionally, I do not wish to perpetuate the idea that being cisgender male inherently makes some of them predators. This is not the case. They are also victims of patriarchy. They simply do not experience its detrimental effects directly. I am not safe because I am transgender. I am safe because I strive to be a decent human being and have been fortunate enough to encounter queer feminist struggles. More recently, I have become increasingly conscious of how badly industrialized nations still treat developing regions. Just today, I listened to a discussion on modern colonialism. How is it possible that, sticking with the topic presented by the speaker, the African nations, where gold and diamonds are extracted, are deemed poor when, in exchange for these resources, they receive colorful paper and aid that addresses only the symptoms and not the root causes, leaving them reliant after we were the ones who dismantled their economies and communities in the first place? There is so much wrongdoing, so much responsibility that I feel overwhelmed by it all. Do not misunderstand me. I am grateful to have become aware of these issues so that I can do what I can to effect change, yet it all seems so futile, and I question how much more I can endure. I am striving to be a realist, and I understand that, in all likelihood, I may not change anything. Nevertheless, I would find it unbearable to live with myself if I did not attempt to make a difference. If you, dear reader, also find yourself privileged, I urge you to reflect. I am not suggesting that you abandon society and retreat to the wilderness unless, but please consider how you can assist those who are less fortunate. Raise awareness, oppose fascist ideologies, support ethical businesses, and provide a safe haven for those in need. Remember, they are not to blame for their suffering. If anyone is to blame, it is our ancestors, and to some extent ourselves. At times, the pursuit of justice might feel like sacrificing a right, but try to view it from another perspective. Additionally, consider the idea that in a system where money influences marketing and the person with the most effective marketing becomes the leader, those with wealth tend to gain power, and those with wealth will likely do whatever it takes to maintain their riches. Prioritize people, other species, the planet, over profits. If you find yourself less privileged, please know that I am sincerely sorry for the hardships and suffering, the unimaginable pain, that capitalism and patriarchy along with myself have inflicted upon you. I cannot repay you and I cannot change the past, but I will strive to alter the future. You are not alone. I do not think I require advice, perhaps on how I can best support your cause and how I can maintain hope. I simply wanted to express this. Story 5. I trimmed my yard waste to meet limits, then piled more for pickup. They came measured and took it all no fee. I shared this in another discussion forum, but it was recommended that I also share it here. So here it is. To begin, I must clarify that I am not entirely convinced this qualifies as pro-revenge, as I don't view myself as fitting within that category. I reside in a consolidated county, meaning that the municipal and county administrations merged several years ago, ostensibly to minimize administrative and infrastructure expenditures. This detail is significant because essential services such as fire, police, utilities, and waste collection are now administered by former county officials rather than municipal authorities. Many of these services have also become considerably less efficient, and certain services have been outsourced to private enterprises. My municipality contracted out the collection of trash and yard waste a few years back. The two businesses responsible for these pickups are severely lacking in ability, and their services come at a higher price compared to when the city or county managed it. Both companies enforce similar restrictions on what can be placed out for collection, dispose of fewer types of debris, and have reduced their service days from twice a week to just one day. As a result, we are all paying more for inferior service. Now that you have the context, here's the narrative. I engaged in some gardening work over a couple of weekends last summer, pruning branches, trimming bushes, and taking down a deceased tree in my backyard. Understanding the regulations regarding the amount of yard waste, branches, leaves, and the like that can be set out, I bagged everything according to their specifications, filling up 3 bags. These bags contained leaves, small clippings, weeds, and similar items. The specific paper bags required for yard waste from major home improvement outlets are the ones I used, ensuring I filled them only halfway to avoid making them too heavy for the waste collectors, despite the lack of formal weight restrictions. Nonetheless, if a bag appears too full, they will topple it to spill out the contents so they can avoid having to pick it up. I cut the larger branches down to under 4 feet in length, as anything longer would not be collected. They will do anything they can to evade picking something up, and they almost always leave a terrible mess behind after they do pick up what they will. The pile set out for collection must not exceed a width of 10 feet, nor can it be deeper or taller than 5 feet, nor may it include any piece longer than 4 feet. All bags should be placed in a single row, no more than 3 feet away from the pile of limbs. My pile was only about 4 inches longer than 10 feet, solely due to tiny ends of the branches, smaller than a toothpick, protruding from the pile. The height was no greater than 3 feet, and its depth no more than 4 feet. In other words, it complied with size regulations, aside from a few small twigs with leaves. Additionally, I had the 3 bags, each approximately half full of clippings and leaves, all lined up precisely as mandated and situated roughly 2 feet away from the main pile. They had scheduled pickups for Tuesday, but when I returned from work that afternoon, everything was still there. A pre-printed notice was left on my door, stating that my collection exceeded the specified size limits, and that I would need to either pay a $250 oversized load fee or reduce the size of the pile by half to comply with the regulations. This is where the act of revenge comes into play. Having 2 days off, the next morning, bright and early, I retrieved the hedge trimmers. I carefully trimmed the ends of the pile back to precisely 9 feet in length. After meticulously laying those trimmed bits atop the pile, I ventured to the backyard, where the branches I hadn't cut the previous week were stacked for the forthcoming pickup, and located 4 long, reasonably straight branches. I stripped all the smaller limbs and leaves from these branches, resulting in 4 moderately straight poles, each around 7 feet long. I marked 1-foot intervals on each pole with fluorescent orange paint and positioned them in the ground at the curb in the front yard to form the corners of a rectangle that was exactly 5 feet wide and 10 feet long. I then took out the surveyor's tape, bright pink plastic tape used to demarcate property corners, and tied it onto and around the stakes at a height of 5 feet. This created a clear visual outline of the volume I needed to maintain. I made absolutely certain that everything in the pile was entirely within the poles and below the height limit of 5 feet. This required adding nearly 2/3 of the remaining pile from the backyard to the stack in front, bringing it to 4 feet 6 inches in width, 4 feet 6 inches in depth, and 9 feet 6 inches in length. No pieces exceeded 46 inches in length. The pile now consisted of nearly twice the amount of material compared to before. This included some small logs, up to 4 inches in diameter, each measuring 46 inches long. The limit is 5 inches in diameter. All of this was within the 5 feet by 5 feet by 10 feet limits mandated by the waste company. I transported each of the 3 bags of clippings to the backyard and filled them to capacity, while still being able to fold over the tops and secure each bag shut with staples. I also included small sections, 8 to 10 inches long, from the ends of larger limbs for added weight. The bags were now completely packed and weighed more than twice what they had initially. I had to use a hand truck to transport them to the curb due to their weight. Additionally, the extra clippings I generated filled 2 more bags, bringing the total to 5 bags. This was the company limit. I then went inside, called the company, and politely requested that they come to collect my yard waste since they had failed to do so on Tuesday. They agreed to send a truck and crew, informing me that I would have to pay the fee. "Very well then," I replied. They soon arrived, and coincidentally, it was the same crew that typically services my neighborhood. I pulled out a 25-foot Stanley tape measure from my pocket and requested that they measure the poles to verify that the space was within the required limits. They obliged, and after measuring, agreed that the pile was not oversized and proceeded to spend the next 2 hours manually loading everything onto their truck. Oh, and it required both of them to lift each of those bags into the back of the truck as well. With a smile, I fairly cheerfully pointed out what 10 feet looked like, referencing the fence where it was marked with orange electrical tape, and thanked them for coming to collect my yard waste. The 2 exhausted, sweaty waste disposal workers merely groaned, climbed into their truck, and drove away. There was no additional fee added to my bill for that month, and there has not been one since. I am aware they were compensated for their time, and I acknowledge that I had to exert considerable extra effort on my day off. However, since last July, not once have they left even a single leaf on the ground in front of my property. They were required to do substantial work while I stood there in shorts, smiling and sipping cold Gatorade as they were laboring.